Hello, everyone. My name is Leanne. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the programming manager at the Barrick Museum of Art. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This talk is hosted by the Mojave Project and the Barrick Museum of Art at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Funding for our webinar series is provided by California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Visit calhum.org in order to learn more. We invite you to attend the upcoming webinars scheduled monthly during the exhibition of the Mojave Project, on view at the Barrick Museum through the end of July 2022. Please visit our website at www.unlv.edu/Barrick Museum for more information and to register for the next webinar. At the end of the discussion, we will open the conversation with questions from our audience. Please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen rather than the chat window. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I would like to say a land acknowledgement. The Mojave Project and the UNLV's Barrick Museum of Art acknowledges the indigenous people of the Mojave Desert, including the Chemehuevi, Mojave, Serrano, Southern Paiute, Timbisha Shoshone, and Western Shoshone, all who continue to occupy and persist throughout this arid region today. We encourage you to become familiar with the indigenous people of the lands you occupy. And now I am pleased to welcome artist and curator Ken Stringfellow.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to host this panel. This is the Big Desert Solar and Wind, but at what cost? We have two activist artists and a poet this evening that are work independently on projects in the Mojave Desert. And I'm going to first introduce them, and then they're going to discuss their work independently, and then we will come together as a roundtable to discuss some of the concerns that are brought up this evening. Please do, we invite you to ask questions. Like Leanne said, if you can put those in the Q&A rather than the chat, that's easier for us to go through those and pick questions for the participants. So I want to welcome our speakers. Our first speaker is Shannon Salter. Shannon grew up in Irvine, California. In 2009, she moved to Las Vegas to pursue a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry at UNLV. She's been living and writing in the Mojave Desert ever since. Her poetry is published in journals such as Interim, the Denver Quarterly, the Bitter Oleander, and the Desert Report. Her poems are in a volume published by Black Lawrence Press. Shannon's activities and efforts to protect the Mojave Desert have been featured in the Los Angeles Times, KNPR's Desert Companion, and the Las Vegas Sun. She co-authored a piece called Where is the People Solar, recently published in the Nevada Indie. Our second speaker is Garrison Means. She's a visual artist, writer, musician, and curator with an MFA in sculpture and new genres from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. She is an art instructor at Orange Coast College, and since 2001 has collaborated with artist Steve Radovich as the conceptual art duo United Catalysts. Through sculptural installations, interactive performances, and storytelling, their work explores connections between actions, environment, community, and self. Starting in 2005, Kim and Steve, along with Kim's husband, sculptor Leland Means, opened up her family home on 60 acres of patented mining claims in the Eastern Mojave as a collaborative project called Mystery Ranch. Mystery Ranch is an art and science research station with an emphasis on local history and ecology. The most recent project, along with co-curators Checo Salgado and Michaela Whitmore, is Spirit of the Land, a multifaceted art exhibition series celebrating the public lands around the town of Searchlight, Nevada, currently on display at the Marjorie Barrick Museum of Art at UNLV. the Searchlight Community Center, and the Laughlin Library. So please welcome our speakers tonight. We're going to start with Shannon tonight and give her a few minutes so she can share her screen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to get to present this evening. Okay, how does that look? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I started Mojave Green in response to what I can only describe as a total solar shit show in the Mojave Desert. In October of this year, I bought a little camper and I found an awesome camping spot where I took up residence near the Yellow Pine Solar Facility, which is under construction between Las Vegas and Pahrump. And I am currently on site. So the little camper that you see here, that's where I'm in now. And I've got my windows cracked. The wind is kind of howling, but I think it should be okay for us. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. First, I'm going to show a little bit about the catastrophe of big solar in the Mojave Desert. And then I'm going to show one alternative, which is to put solar in the city. Then I will discuss poetry, emotion, and the poetic act. So I've spent a lot of time using words to make poems, and now I'm following the same poetic impulse to create a poem that is not made of words, but is made of action and perhaps even made of life itself. So far that has taken 3 different forms that I'm going to talk briefly about tonight. So Camp Yellow Pine, where I'm at now, and the Active Witness. Then we have the Jackrabbit reading series. And then finally, something that I'm just starting is a mitzvah. And all of these actions are a form of poetry. Okay, so first, a little bit about the problem. So we know that we need to get off of fossil fuels, but we just haven't talked about where or how to build the huge infrastructure that solar and wind will require. And the problem is really that the default way of doing things is to let developers just build in whatever way is cheapest and most profitable for them. So this is like a business as usual approach, and this puts profit over the living world, which is basically what got us into this mess of climate change in the first place. And big solar and wind companies are no different than oil and gas companies, and in many cases, they are actually the same companies. And bulldozing entire valleys for solar destroys fragile ecosystems, and it also eliminates the natural carbon storage provided by these places. Okay, so where am I? I'm off of Tacoma Road, about 5 miles from the California state line. The town of Pahrump, which is a city of about 45,000, is 10 miles to my north. And then Las Vegas is over here beyond this mountain range. This mountain range is also, this is Red Rock Canyon over here. And then we have the Spring Mountains and we have Mount Charleston over here. So what you see in yellow, this is the 3,000 acre Yellow Pine Solar Facility, which is currently under construction. And that's this yellow squiggly line. And then the red squiggle is the total area that the Bureau of Land Management wants to permit in this valley. Oops. Sorry about that. That's the total area that they want to permit in this valley. And that's about 30,000 acres. And unfortunately, several big green groups, including the Nature Conservancy and the Wilderness Society, they signed a letter asking that the BLM put solar here in this valley because they viewed it as an appropriate solar sacrifice zone. Okay, and unfortunately, this is just the beginning. So Nevada Energy plans to build a massive transmission line called the Green Link that will open up hundreds of thousands of acres of Nevada's wild outback to solar facilities. So again, with the red squiggly lines, these represent some of the area that could be gobbled up by this solar shit show in the Mojave Desert and the Great Basin. So in 2019, Nevada voted to increase the renewable energy portfolio to 50% by 2030 and to go zero carbon emissions by 2050. But unfortunately, there was no language about how to build this infrastructure. And then in 2021, we had Senate Bill 448 introduced by Senator Chris Brooks, and what it's all about, what he calls the new green energy economy. And this bill requires Nevada Energy to build the Green Link transmission line, and therefore it totally undermines the environmental review process. It's also worth noting that Chris Brooks heads a consulting firm that consults for large utility scale solar projects. And so he is personally profiting off of these types of destructive solar projects. Okay, so why not put solar in the desert? You know, that's a really good question. So this photo here shows an area of yellow pine solar that has been bulldozed, and the metal poles are mounts for solar panels. And I think that in this question, why not put solar in desert valleys? The preposition in here is misleading and it's inaccurate because it supports this illusion that the desert will just go on as normal and that the two things can coexist. I think a more accurate question is, why not replace desert valleys with solar panels? So why should we protect desert ecosystems, and why should we not replace desert valleys with industrial solar facilities? So there's a lot of answers to this question, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that the deserts are alive and the valley is alive. So these photos here show just one wash on the Yellow Pine solar site before it was unfortunately bulldozed and destroyed. On the left, you can see the very important desert pavement and crust. That black stuff in between the rocks is lichen and moss. And so something that's really incredible is that the surface of the desert valley has networks of fungus and bacteria running through it. And this desert pavement, or desert crust as it's called, is thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of years old. And it's also storing carbon. So scientists are just beginning to understand how the desert stores carbon in its soils and plants. But it's now estimated that desert ecosystems are storing about a third of all the carbon on land. And when we bulldoze the soil and the plants, we lose all that carbon storing capacity, and it goes to live free in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So bulldozing a desert valley is very much like cutting down a forest in that way. And then the photo on the right, this shows a desert tortoise burrow. On the Yellow Pine solar site, there were about 140 tortoises dug up from their burrows, and they were put on the other side of Tacopa Road. And within the first week, 26 of them were unfortunately eaten by badgers. Okay, this is another beautiful photo from that same wash, a beautiful blooming plant that supported bees, moths, and other insects. Here is a family of Mojave Yucca before they unfortunately met their end. There are 92,000 Mojave Yucca that will be cut down or already have been cut down on the Yellow Pine solar site. And there's at least 5 times that many creosote. So the creosote here is an incredible desert plant whose root system can actually be alive for 11,000 years. So they're an incredibly ancient species. So as you can see here, solar facilities and the desert ecosystem cannot coexist. In this picture, when you look at the soil, you can see where that truck has run over, all of the desert crust is gone. The yucca and the creosote are gone, the cactus and the blooming bushes are gone. There's no more wildflowers. There's no more animals. There's no more insects. And same in this picture too. The ecosystem has been totally destroyed. We can see the soils, the desert crust, and everything is gone. So since the ancient desert pavement and root systems are no longer holding the soil in, we get an incredible dust hazard. And in this photo, this is dust blowing off of the solar site from Tacoma Road. And in this photo here, this is a cleared area, and you can see a dust devil picked up. So we know that there are a lot of things in the soils that can be harmful to human health. Some of the things are certain bacteria, and there's also naturally occurring asbestos. We actually know that, unfortunately, Southern Nevada has higher rates of mesothelioma amongst women and young people who were likely exposed to asbestos from outdoor dust and not during construction. But we certainly don't know everything in the soils that poses a risk to human health. And we really don't know the impacts that such a dramatic increase in dust exposure will have on people's health in Nevada and beyond. And so remember, this is only 10 miles south of Pahrump, and this yellow pine solar site represents only 1/10 of what they actually want to do in this valley. So because of the incredible dust hazard, the construction company has to spray 350,000 gallons of water per day, and what is really a kind of futile effort to control the dust on site. And then, of course, the developer of Yellow Pine, NextEra Energy, is getting their water from the Pahrump Valley, which is very over allocated, meaning that there's actually more rights to water than actual water is in existence. So here's just a before and after photo. You can see the valley before and you can see the valley after they've cleared it. Okay, so now that I've depressed you to no end, I want you to know that there's a better way. So we actually don't have to choose between protecting natural ecosystems and generating solar electricity. So the photo on the left is my brother in a Walmart parking lot in Huntington Beach. As you can see, the parking lot is covered with an amazing solar shade canopy. And then on the right, this canopy is over the parking lot at Springs Preserve in Las Vegas. And you can see it's beautiful, artistic, and it's really, truly inspiring. So parking lots are an unused urban resource. And a very conservative estimate is that we have 2.5 million acres of parking lots in the United States. Again, that's very conservative. It could easily be twice that amount of exposed parking lots. So that's enough to build 1,000 yellow pine solar sites. So to me, that's really exciting. And at the same time, it's providing the much needed shade for people and their cars. So I started a petition that you can sign at change.org/move solar to the city. And this petition is calling on Biden and Halland to protect our natural ecosystems and also to improve the suburban landscape. And I think that we should also pressure local utility companies not to purchase power from destructive projects like Yellow Pine Solar. So for example, the electricity that Yellow Pine Solar will generate has already been bought by Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Monterey Bay Community Solar. Okay, so those two communities have already purchased it. So I think we can do a lot to pressure our local utility companies not to buy that kind of energy. Okay, so what am I doing out here? And how are my actions guided by poetry? So I love this quote by Arthur Rimbaud. Something he said all the way back in 1873. He said, "One must be absolutely modern." And to be absolutely modern means to break with the old way. To be absolutely modern means to see the world as one piece and really to see the self and the other as one piece. And it's also to see the inner workings of things, not as like a mechanical Newtonian universe, but seeing the inner workings as being really and truly alive. Okay, so the ethics behind my activism really have to do with following what I call the poetic impulse. So I'm engaging in what I would say is poetic action. And the important thing is that it's an act as opposed to a process. So this is exactly the same with poetry. Poetry is an act, an action, something happens. And the biggest and most important distinction between an act and a process is that you know what a process leads to, and you know how a process ends, but you do not really know the consequences of an act. So really all true poetry starts out not knowing where it's going or how it's going to get there. And the moment of poetry, the moment of the poetic act is always an entrance to a new world. It's always transformative. And it proposes a new logic and a new way of being. So I love this photo because it really showcases the poetic act juxtaposed against the process. So this is at a BLM scoping meeting last week in Las Vegas about the Green Link transmission line. And when I gave my public comment, I spent 1 minute in silence wearing this lizard head and looking around at the audience. And this act interjects in the BLM's process. So we sort of know where the BLM's process is going to lead, and we know that the BLM's process and the democratic process has been truly undermined by corporate greed. And that's not to say that we should not participate in the democratic process, but we should certainly speak out when it's been undermined, and it has indeed been undermined. And that's why I think action for me is so much more exciting. Okay, so Camp Yellow Pine, also known as the Rabbit Camp. So this is a form of poetic action in which I'm really maintaining a presence in this valley. And it's a vigil, it's an act of witness, and the camp itself is also a gathering place. So I love the word vigil because it means a keeping watch, and that is what I'm doing. It also means, of course, a mourning for something that has died, and that's also what I'm doing. And it has the connotation of a light, a candlelight in the darkness, like a glow. And of course, the camp itself is also a gathering place, which is really important to my sense of poetic action, because that's what a poem does. It gathers everything into itself. So this is me next to the flag at Camp Yellow Pine. And our mascot, of course, is the Jackrabbit. I love this quote by Walt Whitman. He said, "I could turn and live with the animals." And so another part of being at this camp is for me to reclaim the wild within myself. So I've chosen to go outside the city. I'm out here so that I can love this valley, and I'm out here so that I can truly become a part of this valley and to allow it to become part of me. Thinking about reclaiming my own wild, here is me in my full animal nature in my cat suit. So it's like I'm really truly a new species here, and this is now my natural habitat. Okay, so what do I see out here? Well, of course, I'm witnessing the destruction at the Yellow Pine Solar Site in order to draw attention to how not green this is. And I believe that looking at something creates an energy. I believe it creates an energy between the thing that you're looking at and the person looking. And I believe we can alter the physical world by looking at it. And here it's like I'm gazing into the face of the industrial order. And it feels really good in a way because I can know what we're dealing with. And as I continue to watch the destruction, I feel like I'm almost using the energy of the destruction against itself. And in this photo here, we can see some of the old Mojave Yucca that have been cut down, and they're being carted away in this truck like trash. Okay, so for every mounting pole that the solar panels go on, they have to drill an incredible hole into the earth using this huge machine. And when they have to do this thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of times. And to do this, it creates an explosion of dust. And I think it's interesting too that none of the workers I've seen are wearing respirator masks. So they're all having a direct exposure to the dust hazard. Okay, so here we have the poles being delivered. And again, notice that the ground is cleared. It's so very different from when the valley was intact. Okay, but there's also a lot of joy and fun that's happening out here in addition to all the bad stuff that I'm watching. Okay, so here we have some folks getting ready for the campfire after our last poetry reading. They're sitting around on these great stumps, and you can see this big pile of wood ready for our campfire. And so that brings us to the Jackrabbit reading series. I've been hosting these lovely poetry readings at the Yellow Pine Solar Site. And I love this because the poetry is, again, it's in the act as much as it is in the poems being read. It's in the act of gathering. And the landscape and the valley are part of the art. They're part of the poetry. And you can see here, Jarrett Keene, he's a professor of world literature at UNLV, and he was good enough to debut in a totally outrageous and fantastic poem here with us that everybody will remember. We've just had really a lot of incredible readers. So we've had the truly amazing Claire Vaye Watkins, one of Nevada's most important writers. We've had Ruth Nolan, who's the renowned poet and professor at the College of the Desert. We've also been treated to readings by the incredible Claudia Keelan and Andy Nicholson, two of Nevada's best poets and both professors at UNLV. We've had a number of wonderful readers from UNLV's MFA program. And we've had a lot of readers from Pahrump and also from the nearby communities of Tecopa and Shoshone. So it's been a really awesome experience. And then finally, looking to the future, another form of poetic action that I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start building a mitzvah outside the Yellow Pine Solar Site. So the word mitzvah comes from the Hebrew Bible, and it means a watchtower or a place of watching. And it also represents a promise. And it's a rock pile. And this rock pile can also mark the boundary between two domains. And so here in this case, it will mark a break with the old way and the entrance to something new. And here, this is a photo of me placing the very first rock. And this mitzvah will be a place that anyone can come to contribute by adding rocks and also adding other objects or statuary. So this is a photo of the first objects that I will place at the mitzvah in a kind of collage, in addition to the rock pile that I'll start building. And again, anybody can contribute to. So again, we have a gathering here of various objects. So the poetry in motion continues. And that's it. Please visit my website, mojavegreen.org, and you can follow me on Twitter at mojavegreen8. And this is the link to the petition, change.org/move solar to the city. Thank you so much. Thanks, you guys. And that's it. The end.
So we're going to leave questions to the end. So please use Q&A if you want to ask a question. You can also post things in the chat as well. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Garrison Means, and then we'll get together for this roundtable discussion at the end.
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to talk to you guys, and thank you for showing up and spending time listening to these stories. We also really appreciate being able to share and have you listen openly. It means a lot to us who are out here doing this work. So I'm going to talk to you about Vikwame today. And Ken Stringfellow called us activists. And I wanted to mention that I prefer to use the word advocate for what I do, because an advocate is someone who listens and then is able to speak for a person or a community that might not be able to all get together and speak for themselves. And I am literally a community advocate in one of my projects for the town and area surrounding Searchlight. But also, I feel like our lands need a voice, and they can't speak for themselves sometimes. So they need us to listen to them and then help send their message where it needs to go. So Avikwame, industrial wind, sacred land, and ancient habitat near Searchlight, Nevada. So this is my part of the East Mojave, just north of Searchlight, Nevada, which is 40 miles south of Las Vegas. And this is a view from my grandparents' ranch that they built in the 1960s. This is looking north toward Las Vegas, across the public lands in the El Dorado Paiute area of critical environmental concern, protecting our intact population of desert tortoise. This is all BLM public land. And I've noticed over the years that people seem to have a misconception about the Mojave Desert and also about the state of Nevada in general sometimes. And that is that they describe it as a wasteland. But to me, this place is absolutely the opposite of that. It has bighorn sheep, deer, kit fox, badgers, eagles, hawks, and over 2,000 species of plants. And it feels lush and expansive and magical, and it's ever changing and ever ready to teach us if we take the time to go out there and let it work its magic on us and listen to it. To the south of Searchlight is the focal point of our area, Spirit Mountain, Avikwame in the Mojave language. Avikwame and this surrounding landscape are sacred land. They're revered by a dozen Native American tribes, and this is the place of creation for the 10 human language speaking tribes. And that includes the Mojave people, who have been charged by their creator as part of their creation story to remain forever in this region and protect it from harm. I've been working with Paul Jackson, a Mojave tribal elder, artist, and teacher, and he describes this place this way: it's our Garden of Eden and our Vatican all in one. These public lands are also treasured by the people in my town of Searchlight and the other small communities here. And Searchlight was originally a mining town, but it has continued to attract people there over the years, even as mining has lessened and ranching is no longer allowed on our lands. But the beauty and the majesty of this landscape has continued to attract people to our area, and also the amazing recreation activities that are here on these public lands. This is looking in another direction in the El Dorado and Paiute Valley areas, and we're looking over toward Castle Peaks and Castle Mountains National Monument, and we're in the Crescent Peak region, which is under the controversy of a wind farm currently. But this area of the Mojave is also a part of the densest Joshua tree forest in the world. And it is in fact home to Nevada's largest Joshua tree, 24 feet tall, in the Weethump Wilderness area. Weethump in Paiute means ancient ones. And some of these yucca are 600 to 1,000 years old. And as Shannon pointed out, the creosote bushes and the lichens and the soil biocrust can be much older, tens of thousands of years old. So people sometimes from the outside might consider this Mojave Desert more of a wasteland, but in fact, this is an old growth forest, and this space is filled with ancient ones. There have been a lot of efforts to keep these lands intact and healthy, and a lot of progress has been made in our area over the years. So much of this land has some level of protection south of Las Vegas. But I'm going to pinpoint the Searchlight area and the town of Searchlight now, because in 2006, we got our first taste of industrial energy proposals. The first one was from a company called Duke Energy, and the companies keep changing their names and changing the projects and adapting, so many names. But this was a company from Texas, and when they first approached our town, they approached us with a highly aggressive proposal to surround our rural town 360 degrees, all sides in every direction we look from our town, with 200 wind turbines that were 428 feet high. And now our town building code doesn't allow us to build structures more than 40 feet high. So this was very shocking to us. And it was proposed for BLM land inside our township, so right on our doorsteps. And during the public meetings in our town, when our community came out to meet these representatives, they basically called our landscape and our town a wasteland, and they declared that there is nothing out there to protect, which hurt us and was frankly rude, and resulted in our residents banding together like crazy, and banding together not just with each other, but with our tribal communities and with conservation groups like Basin and Range Watch. And we did this to protest publicly, to speak out at these meetings, to write letters and rally support. And ultimately, several of the residents and a tribal member and Basin and Range Watch sued the BLM over the environmental impact statement that they had created and the discrepancies there with what was actually needing to be protected in the region. And they won. And according to the Palm Springs Desert Sun in 2017, when this happened, Searchlight may be the first federally approved renewable energy project that was conclusively defeated by concerns over its ecosystem impacts. So these were just regular people, my rural desert neighbors, banding together and getting angry. And, I didn't know that until recently, that this had a national impact as well as a local impact. So I thought that was pretty impressive. And I am eternally grateful for all the hard work that people did on that. And I suspect some of those people are here tonight as well. Now, at the same time that was happening, another energy project came to town, or right outside of town, called Crescent Peak Wind, or now Culling Wind. And first, I want to give a shout out to the BLM here. They work very hard for us. They work hard for everybody. And these issues are so complicated. There are so many factors. And also the data keeps coming in, the science keeps changing. The priorities keep changing. And so often the siting of these projects is also not the fault entirely of the energy company. They're just putting things in sites where the data says it's good. Perhaps the BLM at the time that something initially started said this is a good spot, you guys should try here. And so this is a process for everyone, the communities, the companies, the BLM, the scientists, all coming together and trying to exchange information and figure out what's actually here and why or why not we should have this energy project in this land. And I'm so grateful also that the conversation, as Shannon mentioned, is moving toward how ungreen some of these projects are and some solutions for other places to site. We're all scrambling to figure out how to combat climate change. And so a lot of things have been happening very fast, which is why we need people in local communities to speak up when something crazy might be happening as a result that negatively impacts our environment and precious things that we want to keep. So around 2002, we started to hear about this energy project. And this is the view of what that project would look like from the town of Searchlight. And Searchlight is sited between these two hills. So for most people in Searchlight, this is also the view that they see as far as the beautiful western sunset of landscape. And then the energy project is up on those mountains. It's up towards the top of those peaks. So all the wind turbines would be sticking up out of that. So that also did not sit well for a town that already was insulted by wind energy. So the Crescent Peak project, now we're speaking about turbines that are over 750 feet tall in their current revised plan. And to give you some perspective on that, most turbines of that size are only used on offshore projects, not on terrestrial space. So, this is usually like way away from communities and land and an ecosystem here. It's also proposed right next to Walking Box Ranch, which is Searchlight's only preserved historic building that we bring people to and are proud of and have worked hard to restore. And then it's just adjacent to the We Thump Wilderness that we just mentioned had the largest Joshua tree in Nevada. And it would also engulf a number of private properties. So people's homes and private properties would be entirely surrounded by this wind project. And this project is surrounded on every side by federally protected public lands that include the environmental area of critical environmental concern, the Mojave National Preserve, and wilderness areas. So just on paper, if you say those things out loud, we've protected the entire area around this place. And then in the middle of it, we're going to tear it up and put giant wind turbines. It just doesn't sound like an idea that makes a lot of sense. So we're also talking tonight about how art and creativity can help further land activism and advocacy. And one of my favorite things personally to work on in communicating with the town of Searchlight recently on this new version of this project is to make some creative comparisons of just how big the scale of these turbines are. So on the left, we see that largest Joshua tree in Nevada, the third largest known in the world. And then on the right, we see that the wind turbines, which would be right across the street from that, are 32 times taller than that Joshua tree. And this tiny little speck here is the size of a person. That's big. And then also, this one was one my husband suggested, to get a sense of how big the rotor blades are and how big the diameter of the turbine itself is. Those blades are also, they're destroying birds and bats and golden eagles, like this golden eagle here. And the town of Searchlight has a lot of truck traffic coming down Highway 95. So, we all know how big a semi-truck is. So those wind turbines are bigger than if we lined up 8 semi-trucks end to end. So thanks to another 10 years of coordinated activism, we have still fought off this project with a very concerted effort. And last year, the BLM designated this project with its lowest priority status. But the company still is not listening to that BLM designation. They have appealed it. They won't shut down the proposal. And it seems like they're still continuing to appeal and lobby for this project. one of the things that helped the BLM's decision, and the BLM cited many different points as to why this project was not appropriately placed. But one of those points was something that I am excited about, and that was a recent counter campaign to create a new national monument in the area. And I say recent because the campaign itself outwardly to the public is in the last few years, but so much work went into this. It was a long time coming. And this national monument campaign was in fact born out of these very same conflicts with industrial energy projects that wanted to get in to the areas that were not protected in our area. And so one of the amazing and wonderful people we worked with and are still working with is Alan O'Neill, the former superintendent of the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, who knows this area so well. And many other advocates and conservation partners worked to figure out a solution for our problem here. And that's what I think we need to continue to do is work in the negative and speak up when things are not gonna work for our communities and not gonna work for our environments, but also find some ways to protect this land and work in the positive. The Fort Mojave tribe also was very instrumental in crafting this proposal, and they also designated Spirit Mountain as Nevada's first traditional cultural property on the National Register of Historic Places in 1999, and helped establish the Spirit Mountain Wilderness in 2002. So the work to protect this area as a sacred landscape and a precious ecological resource has been decades in the making. I feel really honored as a member of the Searchlight community that the Mojave have given their name for Spirit Mountain of Vikwame to this monument and this effort to protect this place. I think a name is so important. It's such a powerful tool for naming something. And I feel that by lending us their sacred name from the region and sharing that with everyone, that they are helping that with that name, helping combat that myth of the desert as a wasteland and turning it through that name into a sacred space that we all can get to share through this national monument. Also, all the local communities here, Searchlight, Laughlin, Calnevary, Nelson, Boulder City, Henderson, Clark County, they've all been moving this proposal forward and taking this idea from an idea to a bill that is now in Congress. And it's been a real pleasure for me to be the community representative for the Searchlight and rural area here. And it's been amazing to see how much listening to the community's input and concerns and fears and wishes for how this area is used have actually influenced the wording of the bill. So just the interactions with the local community really have influenced what is happening, including also input about the map and what is actually protected. And so that's exciting. Actually, we were able to add more acreage to protect through discussing what was important to the community. So speaking of sharing space and sharing resources and community involvement, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Mystery Ranch, which is an ongoing project that we started around 2006. On the right top, this is my ancestral home that my grandparents built, and it is within the proposed Avikwame National Monument landscape. We've opened up our personal resources to help scientists and artists and teachers and community members come together and interact with the landscape and be inspired by it. And 2006 was also the start of our first round of industrial wind proposals. So for me, this project, which is a desert research station, was a direct reaction to that myth that the desert is a wasteland and there's nothing out here to protect. We all do all kinds of amazing things out here and have lots of fun. We measure Joshua trees with the Joshua Tree Genome Project. We celebrated a Joshua Tree Super Bloom with a month-long rolling tour, poetry readings, and a song event. And we are restoring habitat with college ecology groups. We've created a salvation garden. You can see a Joshua tree going in there that was transplanted from the Equinox Gold mine just over the border in California, and they are replanting Joshua trees. They're doing something right and saving the plants on their private land that need to be relocated. And so, I also want to highlight the good things that companies are doing and that the BLM is doing. So we also have plants from BLM plant relocation programs. And all of our projects have a creative component as well. And this is one of my favorites so far. This is a habitat restoration project that has been giving new life to our historic wildlife pond that's been giving animals water since the 1960s. And we're in the process of transforming it into a desert watering hole that's based off of the Grapevine Canyon Springs at Spirit Mountain. And we're going through in the Mojave the worst drought period in 1,200 years. So we're also capturing images of the wildlife for the first time that visit this pond with some trail cameras. And artist Steve Rudosevich and I have been turning these photos into a video art series called Proof of Existence, which is one of the works on display at the Barrick Museum of Art as part of the Spirit of the Land show. And you can also see some of these videos at our Mystery Ranch YouTube channel. In the next year, we're hoping to complete this transformation and add more native riparian plants, and then also are working up to a live stream video webcam so that not only people can enjoy seeing these animals, but also scientists can study the effects that excessive heat and prolonged drought are having on the animal populations and how much more water they are needing to survive at this point. And also this project, Proof of Existence, is a chance to prove to people who don't get the opportunity to see these animals for themselves that they are still out here and our actions do impact them, big and small actions. Some of our other favorite projects are 2 group-built tiny houses on the property that artists can stay in. One is the Pump House Bar, which is also literally our pump house, and the Camera Obscura house that you see on the bottom right. It is a tiny house that's also a working camera obscura, and you can take pictures of it with photographic paper and film. And then in the center, you can see that the image from the camera projects like a picture in a picture frame, and then it also interacts with the different windows and lighting in the room. So it's really beautiful and ever-changing. We also have an online museum of desert artifacts, and one of my favorites is our historical and native plant cooking and recipe project. And of course, we're also bringing lots of artists out into this space, and they have been creating many works of art that are going back out into their communities. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting, is getting artists out here because they are the storytellers, artists of all types. And so they can bring back these stories that change that mythology of the desert being a wasteland into the desert is a paradise. It's magical. It's a wonderland. And then allowing them to interact with historians, with ecologists, with biologists, and hearing more about the stories of this place just informs their work more. And it's fun for the scientists too. So speaking of all this art that has been getting generated, that culminated in a new project for us, Spirit of the Land. And because a proposal for a national monument is on the table in the area, there's really a need to talk about what the issues with land are in our area. And they're complicated. And we don't want just one news story about them, one article length, but we wanted something that would really express heartfelt how important this area is to many people and for many reasons. So a Las Vegas curator, Checo Salgado, who has organized several previous exhibitions that have dealt with land issues, approached myself and one of our Mystery Ranch collaborators, Michaela Whitmore, and asked if we were interested in creating an art show that honors the Aviquame area. And of course, we wanted to do that, absolutely. And we collaborated with over 60 artists, musicians, and dancers, over a third of them from Native communities in the area, to bring this exhibition to the Barrick Museum at UNLV, where it is up through most of July, and also to two venues within the that kind of flank the Aviquame area: Searchlight, which is right smack dab in the middle, and Laughlin, which is at the southern end. And we wanted to do something to bring all three communities, which are 100 miles span apart from each other, together. We were also especially honored to have over 20 members of the Fort Mojave tribe to add their creative voices here, and not only share art from their community, but also share stories about how some of this art in their visual traditions and song and dance traditions relates directly to the Aviquame landscape. And here are some beautiful images. I wish I could show you many, many works of art, but here are a few wonderful sample issues from that exhibition. And many of these artists got so energized by this that they made a series of work, that we could only show one piece at the Barrick. So I think we have many more pieces to come and many more stories that are starting to be told from this area. Besides inviting these art professionals to also speak for the land. And by the way, we led all of these artists through the landscape and really worked with them to have a deep understanding of what these issues are, what the landscape is. And in fact, every staff member at the Barrick Museum also came and toured the site, because we really wanted people to be able to do a deep read and speak from the heart through experience here. But we also invited the public to join in, and we put out a call for art that honors what people love about our area's public lands, and we received over 200 entries. And those were from Searchlight residents and Laughlin residents and Las Vegas area residents, and also people who visit our area and love to recreate there. We displayed these in a video that's at the Barrick Museum, and then we printed them as postcards and displayed them at the Searchlight and Laughlin venues. And then all three venues had receptions with postcard writing stations where people could have access to the addresses of all of our representatives that represent our public lands, and free postage. So anyone who felt like giving any sort of input about anything about these lands could do so. And you can also view this online exhibition at spiritoftheland.org, our website for that project. For Searchlight, this was our town's very first community art exhibition, and it was pretty exciting. Also, we used to have some independent businesses in Searchlight that had postcards, but we have not had postcards in 15 years that celebrate anything about our town or the lands around it. So suddenly we saw hundreds of images that were beautiful and that celebrated us and told our town that we are special and we have special things here. So it made us all feel really good. And now we are collaborating with the Searchlight Treasures Thrift Store and the Searchlight Betterment nonprofit organization to produce these postcards for sale to the public again. This is just the start for us in our journey. If and when we get a monument designation, and I sure hope that we do, and that our elected officials can see how much heart there is and passion in our community for this. If that happens, we have to continue to inform ourselves about these issues and how to treat our land with the proper respect that it deserves, and also help visitors do that as well. And so thinking about what my biggest takeaway has been through this process, it's how much we have all had to share what we have with each other in order to protect what we have. And that has been a journey about trust for everybody in the Searchlight rural communities and everybody in the Mojave community. We have all had to share our resources and our voices, but we have found out that in the sharing of that, we have become more powerful. And people have started to listen to us. And there is a bill in Congress now because of that sharing. It also has meant that we have to include everyone in this process throughout the whole thing. That's what sharing means, is including people. Even the people that when we start out think might not understand this or might oppose this, we have to show up and share. And sharing means we have to trust each other enough to really share with our hearts what is precious to us, and also listen when our neighbors share what their fears and concerns are, and really take that into consideration and hear them. I think that sharing and trusting means that we can get to those deep and sticky and complicated, deep parts of issues. And we can also start to forgive each other missteps because we see each other as people. And all of these groups are people. I want to stress that again. The BLM employees are people, and the rural community members are people, and the Native community is not just a Native community in concept, it's just made up of people. And the employees at these energy companies are people, and we're all just trying to hear each other's stories. So a real part of this journey for us has also been forgiveness of past missteps and misunderstandings and things that have hurt us. And when we do that and we have that deep sharing with each other and trust, we can start to make a shared plan to move forward and do that together. And I sincerely feel like that is happening now, and that we as a community banded together and with the help of the various conservation groups that are also helping drive this, we can share our passions and our concerns with the representatives and hopefully treat this land with the respect that it deserves in the future. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to that story and just being encouraging by being here. Thank you.
That was really wonderful. I'm hoping that the audience will post some questions. We have a few questions in the Q&A, but I'm sure a lot of you would like to ask, each of our speakers something about their specific project and what they're doing. So please do so before we close tonight. So I want to just ask both of you, this idea that as a creative person, how we can have an impact in our community, in our environment, in our place or region. And was there, I'm guessing, Kim, because you grew up in this area, you visited, so this was instilled within you for years, visiting this place. But how was there a watershed moment, or something like that that happened that made you want to meld your practice, your creative practice, with your to advocate for these particular sites? And do you have anything else on the horizon, any new projects that you're considering? And this is for both of you.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Good questions. When I was in graduate school at UNLV, I used to have these recurring nightmares where our windmill got turned into a big sign for an outlet mall, or there was suddenly like a Las Vegas housing tract or a freeway or something that was like just going through the landscape through me. And I could not stop having those dreams. And Steve and I were already creating work that was based on community and environment. And both of us had already been just inspired. You can't not be inspired by this landscape as a creative person. But I think that when those energy projects started actually happening, it was like my nightmares were coming true. And what was helping me not go insane and become a crazy nervous wreck was actually like doing what action I could. And and as artists, we get to just do crazy, funky, fun things and sidetrack things that the nonprofits can't do, and the scientists don't get to do, and people working on public land maybe can't do. So if you have a private parcel, you can do a thing. So it just sort of naturally developed and felt like this was right. Like telling your own story of a place you care about. It's almost like, how could I be an artist doing anything else and then be ignoring this issue? So you mentioned something about how can other people get involved and do creative things to help, and merge your art practice with advocacy and activism. And I think just get involved and start finding out about an issue you care about and join an organization. Talk to people, do research. I think that all the artists that we work with and with Shannon, we do so much research. We don't want to be the artists that just came in and made a piece that isn't relevant. So I think that anybody can start to incorporate this activism and advocacy into their creative practice. But the ideas get generated from research and involvement. Yeah.
Sorry, Kim, can you repeat that question?
Well, I was asking how your personal experience, which both of you have alluded to during your talks, but it's really meant as how can other artists that are interested in these types of topics, what advice do you have for them to get involved?
I would say follow your heart, follow your gut. Don't overthink things, really. Try to put fear aside. I think it's about like following that poetic impulse and the creative impulse. And, you know, I think seeing activist activities and activist and artistic endeavors is, I think, can be a really inspiring thing. And I think it can interact with your own art. So I think like just following your poetic impulse and trusting yourself. And
Yeah,
I think people should do what feels good too, in a way.
yeah, and I think a lot of us, especially, you know, after the last few years, you know, in present time, we feel so much frustration with world events, and we can become so overwhelmed. And I find that when I focus on my community, my region, that really helps, because I feel like I can be effective in some way when I may not be able to be effective in, you know, someplace far away from me. And so I think this is also a way for us to, you know, it's good for our mental health. You know, it's good for our community. And I think it's a great way to bring your work into this other realm, that it is, you know, create a production in the sense that it's production, that it's doing something else for others and other living things. So I think it's a really healthy type of creative practice to have. So I, you know, want to encourage people to explore that. We do have a question. This is from Deanne, and then there was one from Renee. And if there's any other questions, please post that in the Q&A window. And I just want to mention too that we're talking about areas that are right on the border of California and Nevada. Okay, they're very, very close. So this is really about this Mojave Desert bioregion, okay, which is in 4 states. So I see this, rather than looking at these state lines, I'm looking at this particular region the way, you know, I look at the Great Basin, California, there's parts of California and Nevada that I see them, you know, I see that area is conjoined. So I think that's something that's important to note. So she asked, how can Las Vegans contribute to the betterment of Searchlight besides supporting the National Monument? And I would expand that to say, people of this bioregion, how can they contribute?
Yeah, so we have a nonprofit called the Searchlight Betterment Organization, and that is directly helping our small town in a number of ways, including we're doing a mural project about our public lands this fall, and you asked kind of what was in the works, and that's a wonderful new project in the works where we're taking some of the imagery that we received from our wonderful postcard submissions and then creating a beautiful mural that's inspired by that. And we also have a Friends of Walking Box Ranch nonprofit organization, and we are scrambling to now create infrastructure to ready ourselves to potentially become a national monument. So we don't have a Friends organization yet, but we are doing everything we can to create some new nonprofit resources. But for now, that would be one really important thing, is to just support the work that all those people are doing. Also, come down and visit our public lands and stop into the businesses in Searchlight and check it out down here. And that could really help bolster people. Check out the Spirit of the Land show at the community center. You know, stop in and say, I'm here, you know, to check out your beautiful landscape. Because we're also, you know, trying to wrap our heads around a new identity in our town and like have a sense of pride of the amazing treasures that we have here. So those are all great ways. There are also volunteer opportunities, and Walking Box Ranch has a beautiful dark night skies astronomy program. So we have nights that the public can come out and view the beautiful stars. So, and you can camp out there. There's good stuff out there. So I think the first thing is come and visit, and don't just drive through on your way somewhere, but plan to go out into the landscape safely and carefully and with lots of water and all your good prep, and then just visit and start to let this place talk to you.
And we had another question. It's a little bit off topic, but not really, about nuclear energy. And rather than open this up, I actually posted a historical dispatch on Upshot Knothole, which is a 1953 series of tests that was really, really devastating to the community, especially in southwestern Utah in the 1950s. So Renee, I would suggest you read that. For the state of Nevada, nuclear testing, storage of nuclear waste is a very contentious issue. It's ongoing, and more recently there's been talk about resuming tests, and not, of course, above ground, the fantastic explosions that they did in the 1950s, but nevertheless, it is on the table. And I just encourage people to inform themselves about that. And yes, I think it's interesting to look at this, but then maybe we should look at what's happening in Europe right now and see what nearly happened with Chernobyl, which still could happen. These are sitting ducks. These are targets for these types of events. We have fuel rods in storage from the 1950s that are up in Hanford, and that would be an ecological disaster for the entire Pacific Northwest and Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Nevada, if that was used as a site to blow up. So, we have to think about what are we doing with the waste products of these things before we consider using that. One of the things that I'm not hearing, I'm hearing about how wonderful solar, wind, all these renewables are, but they're only discussed in these large industrial projects. Distributive solar, rooftop solar is not something that is discussed because the big utilities are fighting it. There's things happening in the state of California. Please be informed if you're in the state, because we're writing the governor to make sure that they don't ruin what infrastructure they had for private owners getting rooftop solar. So lots of things are going on. I will be writing about this issue in an upcoming series of dispatches, so you can look forward to that. But this is a very timely issue. And last, conserve. This is the other thing we need to do too. We need to really talk about using less energy. If you are investing in crypto, look at how much energy goes into make blockchains. You really should research it. There's a lot of things that we seem to be getting more uses for electricity, but how we're going to produce it, how we're going to store it, that's another story. So I just want to leave you with that. So when you sign off, you're going to get a window that's going to ask you to fill out a very short survey for the California Humanities who sponsored this project. Please do so if you can. Take a little bit of time to do that because it's really helpful for their programming. Our next talk will be in June. That's going to happen in June 23rd. It's again a Thursday evening at 7. This is Indigenous Perspectives of the Mojave. Please join us for that talk. And then we will have another talk in July. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of the evening. And if you have a chance to visit the Barrick Museum to see the 2 shows that are up, actually there's 4 shows, please do so. Okay, thank you.